When I think about millennials, I mean, I actually think millennials may be the next great generation. Now, they get a bad rap, and some of it is deserved, candidly. But the truth is, there's three differences between millennials and boomers that I have found. The first one is, they look at relationships differently, right? Their idea of relationships oftentimes is something that's technologically based. So it's, who's following me on Twitter and who's following me on Snapchat and who's following me on Instagram and how many Facebook friends do I have, et cetera. And those are the way they actually build relationships. I mean, you can sit with millennials, and I have one, right? And he can be in the room with one of his friends and they're not talking, they're texting. And so that's not how baby boomers build relationships. Now, partially because they didn't have that technology available. So to me, the big idea here is, number one, understand what the differences are. Technology is difference number two. They look at technology differently. Now, I think the way that millennials look at technology differently is why they're going to be the next great generation, because they see technology as a tool to be more innovative. And so their constant focus is, how can we do this more efficiently, more effectively? And that's why you have so many of these apps that are created by millennials. I mean, you got apps being created by 12-year-olds because they see how technology can be used differently. And old geezers like me don't think that way. Right now, we use technology, and the statistics show that like 85% of baby boomers actually use computers. So it's not that we don't use technology, it's that we use it differently. And we see the vehicle of technology differently. Now, we don't see relationships the same way. We see relationships as things that you have to build with human contact. They see relationships as things that you can build technologically. What will happen, I predict, is that when they get into the workforce and they actually are having to go to offices and talk to people, they'll start to understand, probably in their late 20s and early 30s, that actually this relationship thing that my parents probably tried to teach me and I wasn't so keen to learn, probably pretty important now. And the people that will super excel, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Sheryl Sandbergs of the world, those folks will have understood the meshing of the two. The greatness of the boomers, which is building relationships, and the millennials, which is, nurturing relationships with technology, but also using technology to change the world. Those two things come together, you have a millennial who is going to change the world. The third thing is that all of this happens because they were raised differently. Now, they were raised differently for two fundamental, simple reasons. One is because there's a heck of a lot more divorce in the last 40 or 50 years than there were before that, and so there's fewer two-parent families, and many of them grew up in broken homes, etc. They also grew up in times where they saw their parents get fired or laid off from jobs, and so their willingness to be loyal to companies has changed completely. It's why purpose is such an important part of what they do. Now, I also think it's this marriage of purpose and technology that will cause this generation to be maybe the greatest generation ever, certainly in my lifetime. And the other thing that they were raised differently around is simply the times. These kinds of technologies were not available to our generation. It's all many of these people know. And so simply because that's what you know, that's what you do. Now, what are the leadership lessons? That's the question. The leadership lessons are to sell Jane Brown what Jane Brown buys. You have to see the world through Jane Brown's eyes. So my advice is, if you're a millennial and you're working for a boomer, then get you a boomer as a mentor and get that boomer to teach you how they think. Now, at the same time, you can serve a huge purpose to that boomer by teaching them how millennials think, because the average boomer does not understand how millennials think. And there's nothing irrational about the way millennials think. It's just different. And so one of the reasons why I have a 32-year-old millennial as a mentor is because my bias is, if I need a mentor, I want a mentor that I can learn from. Well, who can I learn from? I can learn from a lot of people that know things I don't know. And so I have a 32-year-old mentor and I have a 60-year-old mentor. So I have somebody who has great wisdom that has come with age and experience, and I have somebody who is youthful, has brilliant wisdom, and understands being millennial. So what I try and get people to understand is, how do you naturally connect with people And when you don't naturally connect with people, which is in many cases boomers and millennials, how do you do that? So there's a relationship component to being successful at dealing with and living with and loving and understanding the greatness that's within millennials. And then there's a thinking like a customer component. And I've written 2 books about both of those, and I think that's why I'm eminently qualified to talk about it.